This is Unit 7, Genetics. Genetics is the branch of biology that's focusing on heredity, and heredity is your ability to pass on a trait from parent to offspring. Okay, so there are certain traits that are passed along through your genes and that you're going to get from your parents. Right, a gene is basically a chunk of a chromosome that has that code that we talked about last unit, the A's, T's, C's, and G's, but that gene is going to actually code for a protein, okay? All of us are humans, and so we have the same genes. Because we are the same species, we have the same genes. However, we have a different allele for each of those genes. So, for example, we all have a gene for eye color. We just have a different allele for that specific trait. So you might have one allele that codes for blue eyes, and someone else has another allele that codes for green eyes or something else like that. Okay, so they're just different forms of that same gene. All right, and that ends up creating these different combos when we have a zygote or a fertilized egg. Tongue rolling is one of those things that's actually debatable whether this is genetic or not. But you can either be dominant, being able to roll your tongue, or recessive, not being able to. So those are just one of those kinds of traits. Okay, when we look back at genetics, we look back to Gregor Mendel. He's known as the father of genetics. He was a monk, and in a monastery, basically, he was in charge of the garden, and so he bred pea plants, and he started noticing specific patterns with his pea plants. And so he was able to start predicting the outcomes of his breeding between the pea plants, and that is what we now understand as genetics. So he understood how these certain traits are passed along. He used pea plants for a specific reason. They are really good test subjects for genetics. Basically, there's lots of different traits that you can observe about a pea plant. They have different flower colors, pea shapes, pea sizes, all the height of the plant, and all kinds of different things. They also have both male and female parts, so you could make a plant self-pollinate and give pollen to itself, or cross-pollinate with a different plant. And they grow really fast. So the 7 characteristics that he studied, he looked at the seed texture, whether they were round or wrinkly, the color, yellow or green, the coat of the seed, whether it was just white or had a color, pod appearance, whether it was inflated, which means it kind of looked puffy, or constricted, which is more shriveled, the pod color, the position of the flowers, meaning is it coming out the side or at the top, and then the plant height. So he began his experiments by true breeding a plant. And basically you take a plant that you are kind of unsure of, and then you cross it with something that is just like it. So for example, he took a short plant, crossed with another short plant, and he got more short plants. So he started with that. Then he started cross-pollinating, and that would be taking 2 unknown plants and breeding them together and looking at the patterns. Okay, so he would take 2 parents, breed them, you get the offspring, and then you breed those 2 offspring with each other, and that creates some weird patterns as well. When we look at the generations, the first generation is called the P generation, or parent generation. Okay, then they're cross-pollinating, and we're getting several different outcomes. For this one, notice you have a purple and a white, and you're getting all purple in the result. This is called the F1 generation. It stands for filial, or child generation. Okay, so these 2 cross-pollinated got all purple. The reason why we show 4 outcomes is basically it's showing you the 4 major possibilities that you're going to get from a cross between 2 plants. Okay, so this does not mean that they had just 4 plants that came out of this one plant. It means that these are the 4 possible outcomes. Okay, when we bred 2 of those purple plants from that one generation, we actually got 3/4 of them being purple and then 1/4 of them being white. So this random white flower pops up in the second generation. Okay, so let's say that there were 400 plants that came out of this cross between these 2 parents. This would say 300 of them were purple and 100 of them were white. Okay, so basically Mendel could self-pollinate and get that first generation, self-pollinate with the white one with the white one, and you can get that other generation. So now we know there's no hidden genes in there anywhere. Then he's going to cross-pollinate the purple with the white and get all purple. And then he's going to breed these with each other, and then we get this weird offspring here. Just a little joke. Break up. All right. So when we look at alleles, there's different terms you need to know. One term is called dominant, and that is the expressed gene or allele. So that's the one that's usually overpowering. We use a capital letter to represent this. So, for example, a dominant trait could be a straight hairline, which means your hair goes straight across in the front. The recessive trait would be the one that is usually hidden. We use a lowercase letter for that, and in this case it would be the widow's peak. So straight hairline is a dominant trait over widow's peak. You can be homozygous for a trait, which means you would have 2 of the same letters, either homozygous dominant, which would be 2 big ones, or homozygous recessive, which would be 2 little letters. Okay? If you were to have 1 of each letter, you would have, that's called heterozygous. So remember, you're going to get 1 from your mom and 1 from your dad. When those 2 gametes match up to form that zygote that eventually becomes a human, they are giving each parent is giving you 1 allele. So you may have gotten this big H from mom and this little h from dad, but you are together big little, which is heterozygous. Okay, when we are describing what happens in a cross, we're going to look at 2 things. The phenotype is what the offspring look like. So you're going to describe it using physical traits. And then the genotype is what the genetic makeup is. And that's when we're going to look at those letters. So I'm going to say, what is the genotype of this cross? And you're going to be telling me the letters for it. Okay, Mendel basically came up with 2 laws when he was studying his genetics. Basically, the law of segregation says that alleles are going to separate when gametes are formed. So going back to meiosis, each of those egg or sperm cells is going to have 1 of the genes. They're all going to go into different gametes. Okay? And the law of independent assortment means that they separate independently from each other. So just because you got your mom's hair color does not mean you're going to get your mom's eye color too. Some genes are linked, and because they're close together on a chromosome and can't be separated. But most of the genes that you're going to get are independent from each other. All right, so let's start with how to do a monohybrid cross, which is when we cross only 1 trait. So we're going to start with the P generation, and then we're going to find that first generation of kids, and then the second generation. So this guy named Reginald Punnett came up with a way to do that. It's called a Punnett square. And you guys have done these before, so it shouldn't be so hard. We're going to see a very typical ratio of 3 to 1, meaning 3 of one kind and 1 of the other, like we saw with our flowers. That's called a phenotypic ratio. And then a genotypic ratio, the typical one, is 1 to 2 to 1. So let's see how that's done. Okay, so let's say your mom gave you a big R, little r for a certain trait, and your dad gave you a little r, little r. What you're going to do is you're going to pull each letter into the box. You're going to pull this big R down, and then you're going to pull this little r in. So big R, little r goes there. Okay, then you're going to pull this big R down some more, down here, and this little r goes over here. Okay, and then you're going to go and move this little r down, and this little r goes here. So this is little r, and so is this one. So when you write this, you would say you have two big R little r's and two little r's. That's out of 4, right? So if we're going to reduce that, you basically have half of them being big little, half of them being little little. So we're going to say half of them are heterozygous, half of them homozygous recessive. Alright, so another practice. In flowers, red petal color is dominant to white color. What are the possible phenotypes of this cross? Okay, so this is the same one we just did. So I'll fill that in. Okay, so we knew that there was half of them like this, heterozygous, half of them were like this. So now I got to figure out the phenotypes. So we know that red is dominant. So dominant means it overpowers. It's going to be a big letter. So in this case, this one right here is red because the big R overpowers that little r. Little r is being hidden. And the other option is white flowers, is the recessive trait. And since there are no big R's in this one, this was going to be a white flower. So half of them are red and half of them are white. Okay, let's do another one. In peas, yellow is dominant to green. Across a homozygous dominant yellow pea with a homozygous recessive green pea. What are the genotypes and phenotypes? Okay, so first of all, you have to pick a letter. You could stick with A's and B's, or you could pick something that's kind of relevant to this particular one. Try to stay away from O's and Y's and letters like that. They're kind of tricky. So in this case, we're going to just say a yellow, we're going to say is a big A, and then green is going to be the little a. It has to be the same letter, just one's upper and one's lower. Okay, so a homozygous dominant yellow pea. So that means that it's going to be yellow, so it's got to be a big A, and it's homo, which means same, and dominant, which means big. So, two big ones. Here's your yellow pea plant. And a homozygous recessive green pea. Okay, so the recessive green pea is little. Okay, and we cross that. Okay, in this case, there's 4 out of 4, like that. So you can just write, when you're doing worksheets and things like that, you can just write all are big A, little a. And then it is 4 out of 4 are what color? Which one's the dominant color? That one will be yellow. So it's 4 out of 4 yellow, or you could write all yellow. All right, and that's where we're going to stop for today.